For thousands of years, everyone has read this story the same wrong way. Horus and Set were never two gods fighting for a throne in the sky. They were never mythology at all in the way you think. Every day, inside your own mind, one force reacts before you can think, and pulls you into anger, fear, and division. Another force watches, clear and unmoved, and sees exactly what is happening before you act. The ancient Egyptians gave these two forces names, faces, and an entire war: Set and Horus. If you cannot tell which one is ruling you in a single ordinary moment of stress, you will keep fighting people, circumstances, and enemies outside you, when the only real war, the only one you can actually win, has always been inside. Strip away the theology, and the Horus and Set story is almost embarrassingly simple. A king is murdered, a throne sits empty, and the killer is the victim's own brother. In the wider telling, the murdered king is Osiris, ruler of a fertile, ordered land, the green fields that the yearly flood alone makes possible, season after season. His brother Set, god of the desert and the storm, wants what Osiris has. He takes it by force, not by right, at a celebration meant to honor his own brother. Egyptian tradition adds a detail worth sitting with. Set does not simply strike Osiris down in open ground. He lures him first, with hospitality, into a trap prepared in advance. Osiris's wife, Isis, refuses to accept the ending she has been handed. Tradition says she searches out what force and cunning can restore, and through grief, ritual, and sheer will, conceives an heir who will finish what his father could not. That heir is Horus, not a peaceful successor, arriving to a settled kingdom, but a claimant born directly out of violence, raised with one single purpose. This part is not folklore reconstructed from guesswork. A surviving Egyptian manuscript, written generations after the events it describes, records the legal case in startling detail. Horus and Set bring their claim before a divine tribunal, an assembled council of the gods, to decide once and for all who should rule. And the tribunal cannot simply decide. Some gods favor Set's raw strength, others favor Horus's rightful claim. Letters are sent. Allies are pressed for an answer. Even the presiding judges change their minds more than once as the case wears on. The argument drags on for what the text treats as years, not minutes, with the outcome never settled in one sitting. The text describes contest after contest, trials of strength, trials of cunning, even a transformation into hippopotamuses battling beneath the river where neither can fully see the other. Even a stone boat building contest appears in the record. Horus quietly floats a hull of painted wood disguised as stone, while Set's genuine stone boat sinks outright to the assembled council's open laughter. Wounds are given, wounds are taken. At one point, Horus loses an eye in the fighting. It has to be found and physically restored before the case can even continue, as though the story itself refuses to move forward until that eye is whole again. Eventually, after years of argument, rendered almost like courtroom drama, Horus is granted the throne. But read the ending closely, and it never feels finished. Set is never destroyed. He is only barely outvoted. That one detail matters more than it first appears. Here is where every documentary about this myth stops, and where this video actually begins. What you just heard is what the source describes. What follows now is a different kind of reading, one Enter Within is proposing, not one carved into any temple wall. So state the claim plainly. Set is not a god you worship or fear. Set is a name for what your reactive, fragmented mind does the instant fear or wounded pride takes the wheel. Horus is not a god either. Horus is what happens when awareness itself, calm and undivided, is the one actually driving. Notice what this reading does not claim. It does not claim the ancient Egyptians sat down and invented a psychology textbook. The trap works the other way too. Naming Set correctly in a conversation is not the same as no longer being ruled by him in the next one. 4 things are being kept carefully separate here, and worth naming once: what the surviving manuscript actually records, how later tradition has read that record, what this channel is proposing as one inner meaning inside it, and how that meaning might apply to an hour you actually live through today. Held apart like that, the claim gets narrower, not wider. A civilization that watched the desert and the flood every single year had already noticed something true about the mind, long before anyone had the language to name it directly. And that noticing is what the rest of this video translates. piece by piece, into the mechanics of your own day. Every day, in ways so small you rarely name them, you choose which of these two directions actually governs the next hour of your life. Set was never simply a villain to the people who first told his story. He was the desert itself, the wind that erases a path the moment you have learned it, the storm with no schedule and no mercy, chaos in a land that depended entirely on order simply to survive another season. The Egyptians even split their whole world along this exact line. They called the fertile black soil of the valley the Black Land, ruled by order, and by Osiris and Horus in turn. They called the surrounding desert the Red Land, and that Red Land belonged to Set alone. Two names for two territories, and one of them was always trying to bury the other. Notice what that description actually maps onto in an ordinary life. Set is what takes over the instant something threatens you, before thinking has even started. The tightened jaw before you have decided to be angry. The suspicion that arrives before any evidence does. The reply you send before you have actually read what the other person meant. This is not weakness in the way people usually mean that word. It is fragmentation, a mind broken into competing impulses, each one certain it alone should be in charge. None of those impulses can see the whole situation, because each is only defending its own narrow patch of desert, blind to everything past its own alarm. Picture the version of this that actually happens to you. A comment from someone close to you lands wrong, and within a second, you are already rehearsing the argument, already certain of their motives, already hurt by a conversation that has not happened yet. That entire sequence, uncontested, is Set ruling the mind completely, and it can happen in under 2 seconds. And here is the part almost nobody says out loud. Set is not rare, and Set is not something that happens only to the obviously troubled. Set is the default setting of an unexamined mind, running quietly underneath nearly every ordinary day you have ever lived. Here is the specific trap almost everyone falls into, and it is precise, not vague. Set rarely feels like weakness while it is actually happening. It feels like conviction. The sharp reply that felt like standing your ground. The grudge that felt like loyalty to yourself. Feeling certain, in the middle of an argument, that you are simply right and the other person is simply wrong. The volume you raise because you have mistaken being loud for being heard. All of it can be Set, dressed convincingly as strength, and a costume rarely slips while you are still wearing it. Even constant busyness can wear the mask. Motion that never actually resolves anything, kept up mainly so there is never a quiet moment left to notice what is being avoided. Before we go further, a brief word for anyone watching who takes their own inner world seriously. A channel like this only keeps making these connections with people who choose to stay for them. So if what you are hearing is landing, this is a fair moment to subscribe, and then we will get straight back to the myth. The test itself is simple, and it is not comfortable. If a state makes you feel more right, more righteous, and less willing to look closely at yourself, that is usually Set talking, however good the performance sounds from the inside. It is easiest to see this trap in other people. It is nearly invisible in the one moment that matters, which is while it is happening to you. Which raises the obvious question the myth has been building toward from its very first line. What does the other force actually look like when it finally shows up? Remember the detail from the Tribunal that sounds almost like a throwaway line. In the middle of the fighting, Horus loses an eye. Set tears it out directly, in the single most violent exchange of the entire conflict. And for a moment, the story of the rightful heir becomes a story of a wounded, half-blind claimant. In the fuller Egyptian tradition, it is Thoth, the god of wisdom who appears again and again in these stories as a healer and a witness, who restores it. Not by replacing it with something new, but by making it whole again. The Egyptians called this healed eye the sound eye, and carved it everywhere, from tombs to jewelry to temple walls. They connected it to the moon itself, wounded and shrinking each month, then healed and made whole again, over and over, without ever staying broken for long. The eye came to mean wholeness, protection, restored sight. Not ordinary sight, undivided sight, in a mind that had just spent an entire war being torn apart. This is the exact image a previous exploration on this channel pointed toward without yet naming it. When we described spiritual sleep as a mind divided against itself, reacting to fragments instead of perceiving anything whole. With his eye restored, Horus becomes the ending of that condition, given a face and a name. Horus does not win by being louder than Set, angrier than Set, or faster to strike. Horus wins because Horus can see the entire field at once, cause and effect together, before reacting to any single piece of it. That is what the single eye actually means, not one eye instead of two. The Egyptians even measured the eye in fractions, each part of its shape standing for a portion of wholeness, and by their own careful arithmetic, the parts never quite reach a full and complete measure on their own. Tradition said the remainder was made up by something beyond calculation entirely, which is itself the oldest honest answer this myth ever gives. You do not have to be mathematically whole to be healed. One undivided way of seeing, instead of 1,000 fragmented reactions, each shouting for control. The Egyptians carried this same picture of the eye, all the way to the end of life itself. Anubis leads the newly dead into a hall of judgment, toward a single weighting scale. On one side of that scale rests the heart, carrying every choice and every unexamined reaction of a whole life. On the other side rests one feather, the symbol of truth and balance the Egyptians called Ma'at, the same order Osiris once ruled by and Set once threatened. Standing beside the scale, recording the result without flinching either way, is Thoth again, the same god who healed the eye. If the heart is heavier, weighed down by what was never faced or corrected, a waiting creature simply ends the story there. If the scale settles level instead, the dead is welcomed into a life that continues. Read the same way as the rest of this myth, Thoth beside that scale is not a bystander. He is what pure witnessing actually looks like, adding nothing, defending nothing, reacting to nothing at all. That is Horus's single eye, wearing a second face in the very same mythology. And it answers a question this video has not asked directly, until now. What actually makes a heart heavy is not feeling deeply. It is carrying reactions that were never seen clearly, never questioned, never released. Not an empty heart. Egyptian belief never asked for that, and neither does this reading. An empty heart could not even be weighed at all. A heart kept honestly examined, one ordinary moment at a time, stays a lighter one. Which is exactly what the rest of this war is actually for. Go back to the detail from the tribunal we set aside earlier. Horus wins the throne, but Set is not killed, banished forever, or erased from the world the way a defeated villain usually is. He is simply outvoted, and he remains, still present in the story, still present in the world the myth describes. In later Egyptian religious thought, Set even keeps a role. He rides at the front of the sun god's boat, fighting off the chaos serpent every single night, so that dawn can arrive again. Order does not get to exist without something willing to fight for it. Even the myth will not pretend otherwise. Translate that directly into your own mind, and the entire application changes. The goal was never to kill your reactive nature, your fear, your temper, your instinct to defend yourself. You cannot amputate that part of your own psychology, and trying only creates a different war, fought against yourself, instead of understood by yourself. This is not a call to suppress what you feel, or perform a peaceful mask over a mind that is still quietly at war underneath it. Suppression is just Set again, wearing a calmer costume. Consider instead the version of Set that actually serves you. The alertness that senses real danger. The refusal that protects someone you love. The competitive fire that carries you through a genuinely hard day. Set governed is simply vigilance. Set ungoverned is the same vigilance, mistaking every stranger at the gate for an enemy. None of that needs to disappear. It needs a rider. The actual mastery the myth is describing is government, not execution. A rider does not fight the horse at every step. A rider simply stays present enough that the horse never gets to choose the destination alone. Set still shows up. Horus's task is to be awake enough, in the moment Set arrives, to recognize him, and choose what happens next, rather than being driven by him without ever noticing the handoff took place. That single act of recognition, repeated enough times, is the entire difference between a war that ruins a life and a war that quietly builds one. Centuries after the age of the pharaohs who first told this story, a different set of thinkers, working in the same Egyptian world and carrying Thoth's legacy forward under a new name, tried to state this discovery as a direct principle instead of a myth. Their claim was almost insultingly simple, once you understand what the myth had already shown you without saying it outright. The mind is not a passenger inside your life. The mind is the governing condition your life is built from. Enter within is naming this here as a bridge, not as proof the pharaohs themselves taught it. What the myth showed in narrative form, later thinkers simply said outright. Identity shapes perception. Perception shapes expectation. Expectation shapes the choices that feel natural to you, long before you consciously decide anything at all. Picture someone convinced, somewhere underneath their awareness, that they are ultimately unlovable. They will perceive distance in an ordinary silence. They will expect to be left. And so, quietly, they will choose to withdraw first, causing the very disconnection they were most afraid of. Nothing in that chain required bad luck. It required an inner state left unexamined, producing an outer consequence with mechanical reliability. Two people can face the same disappointment today and walk away with two entirely different lives from it. And the difference will not be luck. This is not a promise that thinking positively will hand you money, healing, or love on demand. Neither this tradition nor this myth ever claimed that. It is narrower and considerably more useful. Watch the same law run the other direction. Someone convinced that people always eventually disappoint them will read an honest delay as proof, stop offering trust before it is even tested, and receive exactly the distance they feared. Change the state ruling your mind, and you change the perception, the choices, and eventually the pattern that follows from it. Enter Within is not claiming that shift happens instantly, only that it is real and available the same way it was available to the figure standing in that corridor. Here is the entire practice, and it asks for nothing elaborate. No ritual, no schedule, no morning routine bolted onto your day. The next time something goes wrong today, a message that irritates you, a delay, a comment that lands wrong, or something smaller still, a remark at a dinner table that catches you off guard in front of people you love. Pause for exactly one breath before you respond in any way. In that one breath, ask a single question, honestly. Which one is here right now? Is this Set, reacting before any thought has actually happened? Or is this Horus, watching clearly before choosing anything? You are not trying to force Horus to appear on command, and you are not trying to punish Set for showing up. You are only trying to see clearly which one is currently driving. Some people find it useful to simply name it in a single word, out loud or on a page. Set. Or Horus. Nothing more elaborate than that. That single act of seeing is the whole of the single eye in practice. Not a personality transplant, not a permanent cure. One honest glance at your own mind, in the middle of an ordinary moment, repeated until it becomes familiar. Some days you will notice Set has already been driving for an hour before you catch it. That is not failure, and it is not a reason to turn the same reactive harshness back onto yourself. Noticing it all, even late, is the practice working. Most people spend their entire lives fighting battles outside themselves, certain the enemy is other people, or bad luck, or circumstances stacked against them. The myth was never trying to teach you about the sky. It was trying to teach you this. The only war you can actually win is the one inside, and it is decided one ordinary moment at a time. Horus had to be born out of a death before he could ever take the throne. That part of the story is usually treated as backstory. It is not. Osiris does not simply disappear from this myth once his sun rises. Egyptian tradition keeps returning to him as the one who dies and is somehow still present afterward, ruling a different kind of kingdom entirely, judge of the very hearts we just watched being weighed. The same tradition says Isis had to gather what Set had scattered before anything new could begin, piece by piece, with nothing skipped. There is a reason this civilization placed a story of death and reassembly directly beside a story of inner sight restored, rather than treating them as two unrelated myths. What Osiris and Isis reveal about the death you have not yet faced, and the law governing exactly what comes after it, is where this same investigation goes next. Some part of you already knows which one was ruling you today. The myth just gave it a name.